Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. All the devils are here. There is no Satan. There are no demons. All the demons and devils are living now, here, on this earth. They look human, but they're not. Their behavior makes them worthy of being classified as demons, as devils. People like George Bush, Obama, Bill Clinton, Lloyd Blankfein, Jamie Dimon, Alt MGTOW, Coltane. People like this are the demons in the world. But there's no justice for them in the next life, and there's no better world for us good people either. So either we kill the devil here where he exists, or we let him win and enslave and rape and kill and steal endlessly, until the human race either goes extinct or is utterly enslaved like at the end of 1984, and it's the proverbial boot stamping on the face of humanity forever. You know? I mean, do you want that? You know, these insane men at the top, they're totally evil. You know, they don't give a shit about other people. Men, women, the bottom 99%, they don't even give a shit about their equals at the top. You know, they're all in competition with each other. I mean, these people are insane, violent, promiscuous, psychopathic, degenerate, elitist men. You know, they're just monsters, and the women at the top really aren't any better either. But at least they can be controlled because they're naturally submissive and weak and foolish. You know, the top men, they're the problem. They are really, really the problem. You know, either we let the devil continue to exist and win, or we kill the devil. Those are our two choices. Our choice. That's our choice. Those are our two options. You know, I say we kill the devil. Or the third choice is to walk away from the devil and form a commune or a new country, a country that uses violence to strictly enforce its morality and to keep evil people out of the country right from the very beginning, because you can't have a free country unless it keeps evil people out. And you can't do it like the Amish and just ignore tyranny and let it continue to grow. You gotta form a commune and then do, you know, eugenic breeding with having half your kids be from sperm bank sperm and amass tons of wealth so that you can, you know, put agents into the government and you know, bribe politicians legally with super PAC donations to get them under your control, to get them to not only leave the commune alone, but to pass legislation that the commune wants passed, to get tax-exempt status, etc., etc. You know, you have to, you know, make the commune super, super powerful so that it can subvert and destroy the government and code the government out of existence. You can't just walk away. You got to walk away with the goal of destroying the government through subversion over, you know, as long of a period of time as it takes. If it takes 40 years, it takes 40 years. If it takes 150 years, it takes 150 years. But that should be the goal of walking away. Anything less is not sufficient. Now, you may say that evil people will just marshal all the people in the neighboring countries to attack or otherwise harm the people in the new ANCAP country, but to that I will say that the ANCAP country would quickly become very prosperous because greater freedom always leads to greater prosperity, both on an individual level and on a national level. So once the ANCAP country is very prosperous, it could fund rebels in those neighboring countries so as to cause problems for those countries that are causing problems for the ANCAP country first. You know, now you may think that this would be the same kind of thing as what the U.S. has been doing for decades, that is funding rebels in the countries that we consider our enemies. But what I'm proposing is hugely different, because if the ANCAP country were funding rebels in other countries, it could do so for the purpose of helping other countries become totally free, which is totally different than what the U.S. has been doing for decades. The U.S. has been claiming to be helping rebels who want to make those countries free, but what the U.S. has actually been doing is funding rebels so that we can get people in charge in those countries who will do the U.S.'s bidding. So we can put puppets in charge of those countries, even though it's usually against the best interests of the people of that country. You know, and because that so-called leader, once he becomes president of the recently overthrown country, is doing things that are not in his own country's best interest, but are in the U.S.'s best interest instead, things that are not in his people's best interest, you know, his behavior just creates new rebels who then just start a new rebellion, so the violence and the poverty just continue. But if an ANCAP country were not trying to overthrow those other countries for the ANCAP country's own financial advantage, but were instead trying to help rebels in those countries so that those countries could establish anarcho-capitalism, or at least leave the ANCAP country alone, then it would not necessarily lead to a cycle of endless violence. Motivation is the difference here. The U.S. interferes to benefit itself. It does so to be financially predatory toward those other countries. But I'm talking about only interfering in self-defense, or only interfering for the purpose of helping those countries, not helping, you know, quote-unquote helping them for our financial advantage, but really helping them, and not even helping them like we know better than them, but like just like assisting them in making their country the way they want it to be, like overthrowing tyranny so that they can genuinely decide whatever leader they want, communist, capitalist, whatever. You know, we don't give a fuck as long as that leader leaves us the fuck alone in our ANCAP country, you see. So, you know, we can help them by just helping them arming them so that they can overthrow their government when their government is being tyrannical toward them, and most of them want to overthrow it, right? But that doesn't mean we tell them what government they have to have, or we try to force them to have the government that we think would be best for them to have. We leave them alone, and we let them decide. It'll be however they want it to be. We just help them overthrow the government, but only, again, if their government is fucking with us first. If it leaves us alone, even if they're oppressed, we just leave them alone. And if they really want freedom bad enough, they'll overthrow their government. If they don't want it bad enough, well, then they continue to live in tyranny. It's none of our business, you know? And if the ANCAP country encouraged or incentivized people in these other countries to do the things that the ANCAP country is already doing, things which are already proving to be very beneficial and would be doing this out of benevolence and wisdom, the wisdom that realizes that if you can make that other country more intelligent and more prosperous and more devoted to freedom, then you can make that country more of an ally and less of an enemy, and you can benefit by doing that, without having to predatorily feed on or oppress that other country like the U.S. does when it gets its puppets into power in other countries. If it gets those people to do that wise stuff out of benevolent motivations like that, then it can improve that country without taking that country over or deciding who's going to run it or anything, right? And if they don't want to listen to the ANCAP country, then the ANCAP country can, if they don't want to listen to our thoughts on what they might do to improve their country, then hey, that's fine. We can just cease interfering, or we can keep funding the rebels without hopes of it working at all, and just do it to fuck with their government, because their government's fucking with us first, right? And then just keep telling the other government, hey, we'll stop funding the rebels in your country if you stop leaning on us, if you stop fucking with us, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, right? If you want an example of the U.S. overthrowing leaders of other countries and then putting our own puppets in charge, which backfires due to more revolution arising as a result of the tyranny put in place by the U.S. puppet, then I will point to Iran. The U.S. overthrew the country of Iran and then put a puppet in power in that country, but the people didn't like being ruled by a U.S. puppet, and so they overthrew him and put the power in place that is now in power. So if the U.S. doesn't like who is in charge in Iran now, it's only because Iran is not interested in being a U.S. lackey, is not interested in pushing the degeneracy in fiat currency and enslavement and other horrible things that the U.S. is pushing. And even if Iran were an evil country, it's not, but even if it were, it would still be a case of it being the U.S.'s fault that the leaders who are in charge in Iran are in charge now, because the Iranians only put those people in charge as a response to the U.S. having put a U.S. puppet in power in their country. A guy who was doing what was in the U.S.'s best interest, and was not doing what was in the will of the Iranian people. What was the will of the Iranian people, and was not doing what was in the Iranian people's best interest. The U.S. only seeks to enslave others. It does not seek to increase freedom in the world, despite what it says. But if an ANCAP country had lots of citizens who were either individually supplying rebel groups in neighboring countries with guns, or were donating money to charities or other groups that were donating guns to people in other countries, even if it were illegal in those other countries to do so, then the result would be that those countries would end up being freer, because the ANCAP country would not be deciding who would take the position of ruler of those neighboring countries, because the ANCAP country would be fomenting revolution not for its own sake, because the ANCAP country wanted to predatorily feed on and control other countries by putting a puppet in charge. That's not what the ANCAP would be trying to do. The ANCAP country would be trying to foment revolution out of a benevolent desire to increase freedom in those countries. The only benefit to that would be the ANCAP country. The only benefit of that to the ANCAP country would be that those neighboring countries would then leave the ANCAP country alone and would not attack it or blockade it or fund any subversion in the ANCAP country. That alone would be enough of a benefit to morally justify, intellectually justify, and financially justify sending weapons to neighboring countries if those neighboring countries were attacking or blockading or otherwise fucking with the ANCAP country first. But if those neighboring countries left the ANCAP country alone, then the ANCAP country would just mind its own business, would not foment revolution in those countries, would not arm rebels in those neighboring countries. Either way, it's win-win for the ANCAP country and the countries that are adjacent to it. At worst, we leave the oppressed people of other countries alone instead of working with their oppressor. Thus, since we're not working with their oppressor, with their government, that means they can overthrow their oppressive government easier, even without us helping them. And at best, we arm them to fight their oppressive government. We arm the rebels in the other countries to fight their oppressive government, but only because their oppressive government is oppressing us in the ANCAP country also. You see? So this is, I think, the valid explanation of why evil people in other countries being marshaled, unified, and financially drained by their governments to attack us, so that their government can attack us. I really don't think it would be effective because, number one, the ANCAP people will be armed to the teeth. And if you don't control the land, you really don't control the country. Yeah, they could bomb us from the air, but if we all have, rocket launchers and stuff, surface-to-air missiles, we could take down their planes and stuff. And even if they did, do a lot of damage in the ANCAP country, why would they do that? What's the purpose of that if they can't win a ground war and take over the country because of all of us being armed to the teeth? So at best, maybe they could annihilate the ANCAP country, but they couldn't take it over because everybody in the ANCAP country would be armed to the teeth. So as soon as they try to move troops in, they get repulsed, And and as far as like economic warfare and stuff, they're not going to be anywhere near as prosperous as the ANCAP country because they don't have freedom. So the ANCAP country would quickly have the prosperity to, fend off any country's, financial attacks, and the ANCAP country would be quickly creating really secure subversive code that would make it so that the other governments couldn't do very effective cyber warfare against the ANCAP country either. The ANCAP country would probably be exporting all that subversive code, so all the people of the other countries, the rest of the world, could also stay anonymous and secure and subvert their own governments much, much easier. So then the government would be having a hard enough time controlling its own people, let alone trying to wage war on the ANCAP country. That'd be a secondary priority. It'd be trying to control its own people just because of all the subversive code the ANCAP country would be spreading to the rest of the world. Now, maybe that would make them want to kill the head of the snake, the ANCAP country, you know what I mean? Like, kill the subversive code at its source, but considering the prosperity and the strength of the ANCAP country because of how well armed the people would be, no restrictions to any kind of weapons they want to have, and there's always usually some other country that'll, sell the ANCAP country really, advanced weaponry and stuff. Who knows? Maybe even nukes. And then the ANCAP country probably not, and nor do I think the ANCAP country would really necessarily need nukes. But why is Korea trying to get nukes, right? Because it's been said, and I think it's probably a pretty fair assessment, especially since they're next to China, and we would love to be occupying a country right next to China, right? But it's been said that they want to get nukes because they want to protect their country from U.S. invasion. They don't want to happen to them what happened to Iraq, right? But they wouldn't even need to be trying to get nukes if they let their people have any weapons they want, automatic weapons and claymores and bullets and drones with bombs on them and surface-to-air missiles and rocket launchers and stuff. Like, if they let their people have all those weapons, then the U.S. would find it impossible to invade North Korea. You know what I'm saying? Even without nukes. So really, the ANCAP country doesn't even need nukes to keep everybody out. So I really think that any kind of argument saying, oh, well, the ANCAP country would be attacked by other governments and everybody in the ANCAP country would be isolated and so they wouldn't be able to defend themselves against this other country, which is like unified because they have the government forcing all the people to be militarily and economically unified in unification against the ANCAP country. I really don't think that's a valid argument. I think all the benefits, the financial, military, code benefits, all the benefits in multiple ways that stem from freedom and which the ANCAP country would have an unlimited amount of, all those benefits would make the ANCAP country extremely strong, extremely secure digitally, extremely strong militarily because everybody is armed to the teeth in the ANCAP country, extremely strong digitally because of all the invincible code that they're writing with no restrictions, unlike here where the government tries to, does raids on the offices of Tails or whatever, to try to fuck with them or whatever, you know what I mean? And shuts down Silk Road and stuff. But everybody in the country, in the ANCAP country would be so prosperous, they would have free time to write code way more. Right, and there'd be way more eugenic breeding, so there'd be more not eugenic breeding in terms of like a commune, like everybody having sperm bank sperm kids, but just everybody would be richer, so they'd be having more kids. So the odds of them having a kid that's higher in IQ than both the parents would be higher. Maybe they'd need to have 4 or 5 or 10 kids before that would happen, but the odds that it would happen in at least one of the kids are higher the more kids you have. You see? So there's going to be more high IQ individuals, maybe not a greater percentage of the population, but there's going to be more high IQ individuals, and then those individuals will be more prosperous, and they will have the freedom and the money and everything else to write lots of subversive code, thus making the country way more prosperous, more secure, and more prosperous because of being more secure. And just all these benefits that come about, they're all synergistic. They all benefit each other and make each other stronger. You know what I mean? And then this means that it's a situation where, the other countries really can't stand against the ANCAP country. And the only reason they'd leave it alone is because they'd be afraid of it. It'd be impossible to take over. They would become actually dependent on the code. Just like they'd be subverting it and using it for their own uses. But they would actually, I think other countries would actually start, adopting the code put out for free by the ANCAP country and would start using it subversively, and then they would depend on those people. The government said the world would quickly become dependent on all the code being written by the ANCAP country, even though it would initially be subversive. It would be turned by those other governments perhaps to oppress their own people. But whatever, we don't care. Those other people want to be, oppressed. If they don't want freedom enough to fight for it, then fuck them. You know what I mean? The people in the ANCAP country will want freedom, and they will use violence to make sure they get it and that they keep it. And so anybody who's willing to fight for freedom deserves it, and those who aren't willing to fight for freedom don't deserve it. So the ANCAP country will just leave those people to be oppressed by their own governments using that subversive code being put out by the ANCAP country. So I think those governments will quickly become dependent on the ANCAP country's subversive code that it's putting out, because they'll use, instead of the people using it subversively to be more free, a lot of the people of the world will fail to take advantage of it, or maybe they can't because they're low IQs, and then the governments will use it to oppress them. But, whatever, like I said, if they don't want to fight for freedom, fuck them, The ANCAP country's not going to save them, And so for many reasons, I think the governments of the world would leave the ANCAP country alone, and if they didn't, well, I don't think they could win against it either. Not win financially, not win digitally, not win militarily on a ground, in troops on the ground level. In any way, shape, or form, I don't think they could win. Unless it was like, the whole world uniting against the ANCAP country and sending tens or hundreds of millions of people into the ANCAP country to take it over. Then they could probably win. But I really don't think the whole world is going to unite against the ANCAP country. I really don't. I mean, that would just be terrible press. It would be a really, really hard-fought one battle. I mean, imagine how many people the ANCAP country could kill. I mean, if they were killing them 10-1, and there's 50 million or 30 million people in the ANCAP country, you really think the countries of the rest of the world are going to be willing to lose 300 million people just to take over the ANCAP country when the whole world knows the ANCAP country is the source of prosperity and freedom and great code and all the rest of it? I don't think so. I don't think they want to waste a bunch of time and money and lives. I mean, not that they care about their people. It's just it would be terrible press. It would be terrible press to have that many of their people slaughtered. Plus, they're gonna probably see the ANCAP country thriving. They're gonna be like, dude, I guess freedom really does increase prosperity. Maybe we should increase freedom in our country so that we can have more prosperity. And I think the governments of the rest of the world will see that, and then probably the freedom they extend will be limited to their people, but they will increase freedom in their countries, because just like the Chinese realize capitalism is more prosperous, they're going to realize freedom is more prosperous, and then they'll start giving their people more freedom, and then that will also make it so that their people are more prosperous, more well-informed, and less likely to tolerate their government, attacking the ANCAP country. Plus, I think other countries of the world have become dependent on the ANCAP country for trade and for really great products being put out by the ANCAP country. And I think the ANCAP country will also be such that, where was I going with that? Son of a bitch, I had it on the tip. I was just thinking of it. What was it? Fuck. Well, there's going to be lots of other advantages, I'm sure, too. That's another thing. China made the U.S. That's what it was. I remember now. China won by making the U.S. dependent on us. They kept loaning us money, getting us greater and greater into debt with them. Well, the ANCAP country would be so prosperous, it could also loan out money to people around the world. And then those people become dependent on that money being loaned out to them by the ANCAP country. And then the ANCAP country's got them by the balls, And now they really won't attack the ANCAP country. See, so the ANCAP country would just kick ass in every way, shape, and form, and I don't think anybody could stand against it. This has been Redshift. Hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Hit the thumbs down button if you hated it. Peace, trucks.